Hi, everyone. So some of you may know this about me. After I got a degree in journalism, and was already working in the business, I really wanted to, continue studying. And I ended up going and getting a master's of science in management, or leadership. And one of the things that I loved about this opportunity was how it explained some of so many of our behaviors, but also conflicts that happen in between, individuals at work, and it is applicable as well, for from a family perspective. And so, you know, one of what it also taught me was that oftentimes some of these models um, make you aware of the fact that sometimes the same word or the same idea may have very different connotations depending on culture and upbringing and whatever. And one of the theories that I think has been super helpful for me, especially as we talk about, I know folks don't want to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it is definitely a great strategy and very important to continue talking about this because it's in these spaces, right, that we get to talk about why there is these conflicts sometimes at work, or a better understanding of our colleagues so that we can create a place that is, brings the best out in everybody. Because if everybody comes out, then, the business and the customer, society, they all benefit. So the, there's this theory that is, and it's based around the idea of trust. What's interesting is, you say trust and you think, well, of course, our trust, we all know what we're talking about, right? That's not different. Actually, there is a lot of blind spots of how we build trust, and how it is very, it depends oftentimes a lot behind whether we come from a culture where trust is created through reciprocity, or if it's created through relationships. What they call low context cultures, like, and there we're talking about like Germany, Scandinavia, Poland. It's more reciprocity driven trust. In other words, people expect clear rules, contracts, performance. Trust grows because they see predictable behavior in another person. It's more of a transactional behavior, even with strangers. This is where like business is business and personal relationships are optional. In the US, you might trust a vendor you never met in person if they deliver consistently and follow agreements. When you take into consideration cultures that are considered high context cultures, China, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, for example, Japan, they are much more based on relationship driven trust. In other words, first I build a relationship with you, and then we can do business together. And that trust comes from personal connections, family ties, networks. A strong relationship must exist before meaningful business actually happens, and business is personal. So in China, a business deal is unlikely to proceed until there is a trusted relationship built over meals, gifts, mutual contacts, even if all the business terms are clear. Just recently, in working with an organization trying to penetrate the Miami market, um, some of the practices or behaviors, or just tactics that were being used in order to grow the network and grow the organization in other places were not necessarily working the same. In other words, they were doing it in LA, in Chicago, in other places. And I said to them, at the core of Miami, business is really this high context culture, whereas because in other markets, Hispanics have not dictated what that culture should be like. They're still driven by a lot of I would say, like the underlying values of low context, or reciprocity, task first, relationship later, relationship optional. Whereas here in Miami, in order for you to penetrate certain markets, which is very, I think, also a reality within Hispanic markets, within big Hispanic communities within big markets, is that you must come in through somebody who's trusted, who's already for part of the relationship and has the relationship in order to grow, your intended objective. So the next time that you're thinking about building a relationship or a business, a business opportunity, recognizing whether this person comes from a more low context versus a high context culture is going to be really useful in whether in how impactful you should be. And I would say also that in thinking about that, and at the core there are these differences that later dictate whether you are successful in that business or not, is another great opportunity for what other things do we have, are we looking at that or not seeing, for example, or taking for granted, because unless you study this, or now that you're aware, you may not realize that trust is built very different depending on which cultures and how and why. And so I'm sure there's a lot of other blind spots that may exist in being effective at business when you are dealing with different cultures. So I hope you enjoy this. This is, again, my name is Terry. This is the Tag Collab. And if you like what you see, please share. Take care.